Welcome to this 365 Freedom Strategy session. Today we're breaking down the mechanics of calm operations and why chaos is never a requirement for growth.
It's it is probably the single most pervasive lie we tell ourselves in business.
That if you aren't sweating, you aren't building.
Exactly. That if you aren't in a state of constant panic, you aren't growing. And today, we're going to surgically remove that lie.
Which is needed because I'm looking at this massive stack of internal case studies, strategy emails, and these really granular operational audits we have in front of us.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
And honestly, reading through them, the tone isn't what I expected.
How so?
It's not your typical, rah-rah, you can do it, just hustle harder kind of advice. It's actually quite confrontational.
Well, it has to be. The material is explicitly designed as an intervention.
It certainly feels like an intervention. And there's this specific concept here that acts as the backbone of the entire philosophy of the chaos tax.
Right.
But before we get to the tax itself, we really need to look at the diagnosis.
We do.
These strategy documents open with a premise that I think might actually upset a few people listening to this.
It usually does.
It basically says, look, if your business is chaotic, if you are running around with your hair on fire every single day, that is not a sign that you are crushing it.
No, it's a sign that you are broken.
Right. Broken.
Broken engine. That is the specific phrase used in the diagnostics. And I want to pause on that analogy for a second because it's critical to understanding the rest of this session.
Go for it.
Think about car culture for a moment.
No.
If you see a high-performance vehicle, let's say a Ferrari or a McLaren, driving down the street,
Okay.
and it is smoking, it's shaking violently, and making this horrible metallic grinding noise.
You don't say, wow, look at the torque on that thing.
Exactly. You say, get away from that, it's going to blow.
Right. You'd be terrified of it.
You would be. You would recognize it as a catastrophic failure in progress. But in entrepreneurship, we have completely inverted that logic.
We really have.
We look at a founder who hasn't slept in 3 days, who's answering emails at 2 in the morning, whose team is constantly pinging them on Slack with emergencies.
Whose calendar is just a solid block of red.
Yes, exactly. And what do? We applaud.
We say, look at the hustle, look at the grind.
That person is dedicated. But the source material is here to completely dismantle that myth. That isn't speed you're looking at.
It's friction.
That is friction.
And friction creates heat.
And heat burns cash. Heat burns talent. And eventually, heat melts the engine block entirely.
That's a brutal reality check.
It is the reality we are dealing with. The documents are explicit about this. Most entrepreneurs believe a loud business is a growing business.
When in fact,
If a business requires panic just to function on a daily basis, it is not actually a business.
what is it then?
It is a very expensive, very loud job.
Okay, I want to push back on that for just a second to play devil's advocate for the listener.
Keys do.
Because I can hear someone out there saying, okay, sure, in an ideal world, we'd all be Zen masters sitting on a mountain. But I'm in a startup phase.
Right, I'm scaling.
Yeah, I'm in a growth phase. Isn't a little bit of chaos just the price of admission?
That right there, that is the trap.
It is.
Absolutely. That belief, the idea that stress is the price of admission, is exactly what the material defines as the chaos tax.
So the belief itself is the tax.
It's a belief system that justifies systemic inefficiency. Look, of course there will be hard work.
Right.
There will be long hours when you are building something of value. But there's a massive difference between intense, productive focus and chaotic reaction.
Okay, so let's clearly define this tax. Because usually when we talk about taxes, we're talking about the IRS taking cut of your profit at the end of the year.
Right.
But this feels much more insidious than that.
It's far more insidious. The chaos tax isn't taken from your profit margin. It is taken directly from your potential.
Explain that.
Let's put a real number on this to make it concrete for you. If you are the founder, let's say your effective hourly rate in terms of strategic value.
Meaning the value you create when you're actually working on the vision, the product, the big partnerships.
Exactly. That rate should be, conservatively speaking, $500 or $1,000 an hour.
Sure, that's a fair baseline for a CEO of a growing company.
Okay, so keep that number in your head. Now imagine you spend 30 minutes in the morning fixing a jam in the office printer.
Oh, man.
Or you're hunting down a Google Drive link that wasn't filed correctly. Or you're personally answering a client question that your support team should have handled but didn't know how to.
I see where this is going.
You didn't just lose 30 minutes of time.
Yeah.
You spent $500 of strategic capital to solve a $10 problem.
Wow.
That is the chaos tax. It is an insolvency issue at its core. You are mathematically incorrectly allocating your most precious resource, and you are paying the difference with your own life force.
That life force aspect, that's where these documents get uncomfortably specific.
They don't pull punches.
They really don't. There's a list here of the symptoms of payment. And I have to be honest, reading through this list, I felt a little attacked.
It's a mirror.
It describes the morning routine of someone who is actively paying the chaos tax. And it was jarring how accurate it was.
Let's walk through that morning. Let's break it down. Because we have a specific case study in the notes we can use.
Right. The student mentioned in the microstory and the blog post sources.
Yes. Let's call him Mark. Mark is the perfect archetype of the modern successful failure.
Successful failure. That is a very heavy label.
But it fits perfectly. Because by every single external metric revenue, year-over-year growth, market presence, Mark was winning.
The bank account looked good?
The bank account looked great. But internally, the source material describes him as a complete wreck.
So what does Mark's morning look like?
Mark opens his eyes. What is the very first thing he does?
He reaches for the phone on the nightstand.
Before his feet even hit the floor, before he said good morning to his wife, before he's had a glass of water, he reaches for the external brain.
And what does he see when the screen lights up?
He sees the stack. 3 urgent Slack notifications from his lead developer, a literal fire in the email inbox from an angry customer, and maybe a missed call from a supplier on the East Coast.
Boom. Cortisol spike.
Immediately. His heart rate jumps from a resting 60 to 90 beats per minute in an instant. He hasn't even hydrated yet, and his physical body is already locked into fight or flight mode.
The source material uses a very specific visceral word for this sensation. It calls them collisions.
Collisions. Yeah.
That word stood out to me. It sounds violent.
It is violent if you think about it in terms of physics.
How so?
When 2 objects collide in the physical world, kinetic energy is lost from the system. It is converted into heat and sound, noise.
Okay, I follow you.
In a business context, when you collide with a problem the very moment you wake up, you are converting your finite mental energy into heat, which manifests as stress and noise.
Like complaining or frantic typing.
Exactly. You are burning through your premium fuel before you have even backed the car out of the driveway.
And Mark's day just continues exactly like that. The documents describe his typical workday as one giant fire drill.
Because it's purely reactive. That is the key word here. He isn't acting upon his business. He is reacting to it.
He's a pinball in a machine that he built himself.
That's a great way to put it. He just bounces wildly from an unhappy client over to a broken server, down to a shipping error in the warehouse.
And by the time 6 o'clock rolls around, he's exhausted.
Completely drained.
But, and this is a crucial distinction, the material makes it is not the good kind of exhaustion.
Yeah, it's not.
It's not the feeling you get after running a marathon or, building a deck in your backyard.
Not at all. It's the exhaustion of the hamster wheel. You ran 10 miles, you sweated buckets, your legs are cramping.
Yeah.
But you moved 0 inches forward.
You're exactly where you started.
Mark ends his day feeling totally hollowed out. But if you stopped him and asked, Mark, what did you build today that will still exist next year?
He wouldn't have an answer.
He couldn't answer. He just kept the plate spinning for another 12 hours.
And this leads us to the ultimate question of why. Why did Mark do this to himself?
Right.
He's clearly a smart guy. He built a revenue-generating company from scratch. Why couldn't he see that he was trapped?
And this brings us right into segment 2, the false proxy for growth.
Because this is where we really have to get into the psychology of the founder.
We do. Why do we tolerate this level of chaos? The source material suggests it is not actually just tolerance.
It's addiction.
It's an addiction to the hero complex. We have to deconstruct what they call the hustle lie.
Source 5 puts it very bluntly. It says, most people think growth has to be loud.
Yes. But deeper than the cultural expectation, there's a chemical component happening in the brain.
When Mark solves a problem, let's say the server goes down, and he swoops in at the last second to reboot it and save the data.
What happens in his brain right then?
He gets a massive dopamine hit.
Immediate, overwhelming validation. I am necessary. I am smart. I saved the day.
It feels good to be the firefighter.
Of course it does. The firefighter gets the applause from the crowd. The firefighter gets to wipe the soot off his forehead, look at the team, and say, "Phew, that was close, guys. Good job."
Right. But nobody applauds the fire marshal.
Precisely. The fire marshal is the quiet guy with the clipboard who walks around the building 6 months earlier,
Checking the sprinkler systems.
ensuring the drywall is fire retardant, checking the exit signs. It is boring, tedious work. It is quiet work.
But if the fire marshal does his job perfectly, there is no fire.
And if there is no fire, there is no hero moment for Mark.
So Mark was addicted to being the firefighter because he fundamentally didn't know how to value being the fire marshal.
He was confusing the adrenaline of firefighting with actual operational progress. He thought because his heart was racing, the business was moving forward.
But the text calls this the static of chaos.
Yes, the static prevents clarity. You cannot see the road ahead when you are constantly wiping soot out of your eyes. You're just reacting to the heat.
Now, the material mentions a specific scaling trap related to all of this. There is a mention of a founder hitting a wall in source 4.
Right.
It seems like this hero complex strategy works fine until it abruptly doesn't.
Well, it works when you're small.
When you have, what, 5 clients?
Exactly. When you have 5 clients, you can hero mode your way through the entire week. You can hold all the details in your head. You can personally text every client.
But Mark hit the wall.
Revenue plateaued hard. He was working 16 hours a day and physically couldn't squeeze out another single minute of productivity.
Now here is the real tragedy of the situation. What was Mark's diagnosis of his own problem at that moment?
What did he think he needed?
The source says he thought he needed more traffic or a better sales script.
Yes. He thought the problem was he just wasn't feeding the beast enough raw material.
The more fallacy.
If I just had more leads coming in, I could hire more people to help me put out the fires.
But the actual diagnosis from the audit was completely different. It stated his operations were a mess of urgent notifications and manual fixes.
So if you pour more traffic into that specific machine,
You blow up the engine.
the key insight from Source 4 is chilling for anyone in this phase. It says, scaling on top of chaos just creates a bigger disaster.
That makes perfect sense.
Imagine Mark is juggling 3 chainsaws. He is sweating, he is terrified, he is barely catching them by the handles.
Okay.
And then he turns to you and says, you know what would solve this stress? Throw me 3 more chainsaws.
That is a suicide mission.
But that is exactly what scaling looks like without calm operations in place first. You cannot grow a broken system. You only magnify the breakage.
The cracks just get wider.
Much wider. If you have a 10% error rate at $1 million in revenue and you force scale that to $10 million,
You don't just have more money in the bank.
no, you have 10 times the errors. You have 10 times the angry customers writing bad reviews. You have 10 times the potential lawsuits. You implode under your own weight.
Okay, so we have the diagnosis loud and clear. We know Mark is paying the chaos tax heavily. We know he's addicted to the dopamine of the hero complex.
Yes.
Now, the listener is probably thinking, all right, I'm guilty. I am Mark. I check my phone in the bathroom before I even shower. I juggle the chainsaws. How do I actually stop?
You have to audit the machine.
Which brings us to segment 3, the audit, transitioning from reaction to architecture.
This is where the real work begins.
The source material references this methodology called the chaos audit, but I want to get extremely specific here.
Let's do it.
If I am sitting at my desk right now listening to you say this, how do I actually execute this audit? Is it just a mindset shift or is it a spreadsheet thing?
It is a pen and paper thing.
Pen and paper.
The material suggests a methodology that is ruthlessly simple, but very confronting. It asks you to answer 2 fundamental questions.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, where is the founder leaking energy?
Leaking energy. That is a great phrase.
Think of yourself like a battery. You wake up, you start the day with a 100% charge.
Right.
Every single decision you make throughout the day costs battery life.
Decision fatigue.
Exactly. Now, strategic decisions like asking, should we acquire this competitor, cost a lot of battery, but they have a massive return on investment.
They move the needle.
But low-level decisions, like a team member asking, where do we store the new logo files, cost small amounts of battery, but they add up rapidly.
It's death by 1,000 cuts.
Precisely. And the second question of the audit is, where are reactive decisions being made?
So how do we find those leaks and reactions?
Here is the workshop version of the audit you can do today. Take your calendar from the last 2 weeks. Print it out physically.
Okay, paper calendar.
Get a red pen. I want you to go through line by line and circle every single event, meeting, or task that was a direct reaction to a lack of documentation.
Give me a concrete example of that.
Okay. You look at Tuesday, and you see a 15-minute impromptu call with your fulfillment manager.
Sure.
You ask yourself, why did that call happen? Oh, he wasn't sure if we should ship this specific product here to Canada.
Right. Quick question.
But why wasn't he sure? Because you do not have a clear shipping protocol document for international orders.
Oh, I see.
So red circle. That 15-minute meeting was a penalty you paid for a lack of protocol.
Ouch. Okay. What else might I find?
You see a block of time on Thursday afternoon labeled email catch-up. You dig into what you actually did during that hour.
Okay.
You realize you spent 40 minutes answering the exact same 3 questions from 5 different prospects.
That happens all the time.
Why did it happen? Because your FAQ page on the website is outdated, or your automated sales sequence doesn't address those objections up front.
Red circle.
Red circle. That 40 minutes was a penalty.
So when you look at the calendar after doing this exercise for 2 weeks worth of data,
It looks like a crime scene.
it's just bleeding red ink everywhere.
And that visual is the wake-up call you need. You look at all that red and you realize, I am not busy doing business. I am busy fixing the fact that I haven't built a proper business.
That perfectly highlights the root cause identified in the material, a systemic lack of clear protocols.
The definition of inefficiency provided in Source 7 is brilliant here. It says inefficiency is making the same decisions over and over because a system wasn't built to handle it once.
If you answer a question twice, you have failed.
You have failed the operational test. You should answer it once, document it permanently, and never speak of it again.
But here is the major psychological hurdle, and the student Mark faced this exact resistance too. There's a deep fear of boredom.
Yes.
He actually resisted putting the protocols in place because he thought, if I automate everything, what will I actually do all day? Won't it just be boring?
We call that the boredom paradox, and it is very real.
Explain that.
High-energy founders often subconsciously sabotage their own operations because they crave the excitement and chaos of the early startup phase.
They want the thrill of the hunt.
They worry that order equals stagnation. They think if the Slack channel is quiet, the business is dying.
So how do you reframe that for them?
You have to realize that order is not boredom. Order is the only path to actual freedom.
That requires a massive identity shift.
It is the hardest part of the entire process. You have to actively move from being the victim of your inbox to being the architect of your future.
Break that down for me. Victim versus architect.
A victim wakes up, opens their laptop, and essentially asks, what does the world want from me today?
They are totally subservient to incoming requests.
Yes, they let other people's emergencies dictate their schedule. An architect, on the other hand, wakes up and asks, what am I building today?
They impose their will on the schedule.
They dictate the terms of their day. But you cannot be an architect if you're constantly walking over to answer the doorbell every 3 minutes. You have to lock the door to draw the blueprints.
So let's talk about those locks. Let's talk about how to draw those blueprints. This is segment 4, the mechanism. How do we actually implement POM operations?
The sources outline several core principles, and it starts with this concept of steady versus frantic.
Source 5 says, steady wins, frantic loses. It sounds a bit like a bumper sticker.
It does, but it is pure operational doctrine. Think of the Navy SEAL mantra. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
I've heard that.
Frantic energy looks like speed to an amateur, but it inevitably creates mistakes. Mistakes create rework, and rework is incredibly slow.
And rework creates that friction we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. Calm operations is fundamentally about the removal of friction.
Doing the right things with a steady, unhurried cadence.
It's the difference between a novice sprinter just flailing their arms trying to go fast and an elite marathon runner with perfect rhythmic form.
The marathon runner looks almost relaxed.
But they are covering ground relentlessly.
Let's get tactical with this. The source mentions simplification and automation as the next steps.
Right.
In Mark's case, the solution to hitting his revenue wall wasn't going out and hiring 10 more people to handle the mess.
No, it was simplifying the mess first. Complexity is the absolute enemy of execution.
We do love to make things complex, though.
We build these absurdly complex workflows because it makes us feel sophisticated. Oh, the client email comes in here, then it gets manually tagged by John, then it goes to a Slack channel for Bob to review, then Mary drafts a reply.
It sounds impressive until you have to run it.
It's a nightmare.
Oh,
Cut it out. You have to look at the process and ask, how few steps can this possibly take?
And then the crucial follow-up question.
Can a machine do it?
The automation piece.
Listen, if a human being on your payroll is doing a job that a simple software script could do, You are burning human potential.
You are asking a human to be a robot.
And humans are terrible at being robots. They get bored, they make typos, they get tired after lunch.
Robots, however, love being robots.
They never sleep, they never complain, they never make a typo. Automating those repetitive friction points is completely non-negotiable if you want calm operations.
But you can't automate every single thing in a business.
Sure.
Sometimes you do need humans in the loop.
True. And that's where Source 7 talks about boundaries, specifically informational boundaries.
This is how we cure Mark's terrible morning routine, setting strict, impenetrable boundaries on how information is allowed to reach the founder.
So, turning off the notifications.
If your employees can text you, WhatsApp you, DM you on Instagram, Slack you, and email you at any time of the day or night,
You don't have a business.
you have an open bazaar. You are standing in the middle of a crowded marketplace just shouting over the noise.
You need to build a gated community instead.
You need heavy gates. You need defined channels. You tell the team, listen, urgent issues, and I mean, the server is literally on fire and we are losing thousands of dollars a minute. Urgent, go to this specific emergency phone number.
And what about everything else?
Everything else, the questions, the updates, the low-level approvals goes into the project management tool, which I check exactly twice a day.
By controlling the flow of information, you protect your state of mind.
You cannot possibly have deep strategic thoughts if your phone is vibrating in your pocket every 4 minutes. And finally, the last mechanism is protocols. We touched on this with the red pen exercise, but I want to know what a genuinely good protocol looks like.
Okay.
Is it a massive 50-page standard operating procedure manual?
God, no. Nobody reads 50-page manuals. They just gather digital dust.
So what is it?
A good protocol is essentially an algorithm. It is a simple if-then statement written down.
Give me a real-world example of that.
Let's take a standard refund protocol for an e-commerce brand.
Okay.
A bad protocol would say, use your best judgment when a customer asks for a refund.
Which causes the employee to panic and ask the founder every single time because they are terrified of making the wrong call.
Exactly. It creates a bottleneck. Now, a good protocol says, if the refund request is made within 30 days of purchase and the product tracking shows it was returned unopened, then issue the refund immediately. Do not ask for my permission.
That's very clear.
If the request is over 30 days, reply with email template B.
That's the whole thing.
That's it. Now the employee is programmed with the correct logic. They don't need to ask Mark. Mark doesn't get interrupted during his deep work.
The customer gets a fast answer.
Friction is entirely removed from the system.
It seems so incredibly obvious when you say it out loud like that, yet so few founders actually do it.
Because writing that protocol takes 15 minutes of focused thought.
Right.
And just answering the employee's Slack message takes 30 seconds.
It's the path of least resistance in the moment.
So we tell ourselves, I'm too busy to write the protocol right now. I'll just answer the quick question.
Yeah.
But we willfully forget that we will have to answer that exact same question 500 times over the next 5 years.
You have to invest the 15 minutes today to save the 500 interruptions tomorrow.
That is the architect mindset we discussed earlier. You are building infrastructure for the future.
Okay, so let's say we do all of this. We do the calendar audit, we build out the if-then protocols, we set the strict communication boundaries.
And do the work.
What actually happens? Which brings us to segment 5, the result.
The shift in the energy of the company is palpable almost immediately.
Let's start with the operational outcomes.
Source 4 points out something fascinating. It says, when chaos is removed, the team starts taking ownership.
That is interesting because usually founders complain about the exact opposite. They say, my team never takes initiative. They just sit around waiting for me to decide everything.
I hear that constantly from clients.
But you're saying that lack of initiative is actually a symptom of the founder's own chaos.
100%. If the work environment is highly chaotic and reactive, taking initiative is extremely dangerous for an employee.
Because they might step on a landmine.
Exactly. If I make a decision on my own and it turns out to be wrong, and the founder's already stressed out and overwhelmed, I might get yelled at.
So I just freeze.
I embrace learned helplessness. It's a survival mechanism. I just wait to be told what to do by the boss.
But with clear protocols.
With protocols, the rules of the game are clearly defined. The protocol says I am authorized to refund this up to $100.
Right.
I am psychologically safe to act.
Safety breeds ownership.
When you install calm operations, you finally empower your team to actually do the jobs you hired them to do.
And this inevitably leads to scalability.
A calm business is a scalable business. You can only scale a foundation that is stable.
If Mark tries to scale his chainsaw juggling act, he crashes.
But if he scales a protocol-driven machine, he wins effortlessly. This allows for what Source 2 calls quiet precision.
Quiet precision. It makes me think of a surgical theater in a hospital.
It absolutely should. Think about it. A surgical theater is a high-stakes life-or-death environment.
Right.
But is the lead surgeon running around the room screaming at people?
Right.
Is the nurse panicking and dropping instruments?
No, it's completely controlled.
It is deadly quiet. It is incredibly precise. Everyone knows their exact role. That is exactly how a high-stakes, high-revenue business should run.
Now, I want to pivot to the personal side of this, the psychological outcomes for the founder. Because when all that noise finally stops, sometimes that is actually a really scary moment.
It is terrifying for some. We have to address the void.
The void.
When you stop fighting fires every minute of the day, suddenly you have free time on your calendar.
Right space.
And for a founder who has run on pure adrenaline for 5 years straight, silence can feel exactly like anxiety.
They think, why isn't my phone ringing? Is the website down? Is something horribly wrong?
But the source material is very clear that this void is where the actual magic happens.
This is the breath of fresh air mentioned in the texts.
Yes. Stress levels simply plummet. Source 7 notes profound physiological changes. It says the founder stopped waking up with a racing heart.
That isn't just a business metric, that's a medical improvement.
That is literal years added back to your lifespan.
And there's a note here about reclaiming life.
Stop checking the phone at dinner.
Being physically and mentally present with your family again.
But ultimately, from a business perspective, it leads to strategic capacity.
Which is defined as the shift from thinking about the next 3 minutes to thinking about the next 3 years.
That is the real ROI of this entire process.
It's massive.
You literally cannot think about what the market will do in the next 3 years when your brain is locked in a threat response mode about a late shipment today.
Your brain physically won't allocate the resources for it.
It is hyper-focused on the tiger in the bushes right in front of you. But when you remove the tiger, when you eradicate the daily chaos, your brain is finally allowed to expand its horizon.
You start seeing gaps in the market that your stressed out competitors are totally missing.
You see new product lines. You spot strategic partnerships. You see the big picture.
So Mark, in our case study, he didn't just get to take a nap and relax. He actually grew the business exponentially because he finally relaxed.
Exactly. He had the mental room to maneuver. He stopped desperately chasing his own tail and started actually mapping the territory ahead.
This brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. We can't just leave the listeners with high-level theory.
No, we need execution.
We need to give them something concrete to do today.
Yeah.
Segment 6, strategic application.
The source material offers a brilliant daily objective. And I love this specific exercise because it is so small and approachable.
It doesn't ask you to burn down your whole company and rebuild it overnight.
Not at all.
So what is the challenge?
The challenge for the listener is this. Identify just one recurring emergency in your business this week. Just one.
The pebble in your shoe.
Find the thing that made you roll your eyes or clench your jaw or say, why is this happening again?
Maybe it's that one client who always asks for their invoice on the wrong day of the month. Or maybe it's a minor server glitch that keeps popping up.
Whatever it is, step 1 is to just identify it.
Okay, and step 2.
Step 2, build a simple protocol to ensure it never ever becomes an emergency again.
Don't just fix it this one time to get it off your desk.
Right. Build the rule, whether that's an email automation, a checklist for the team, or a client onboarding template so that next time the system handles it automatically.
And we'll take it forever.
Fix it forever. And then next week, you find another pebble.
It's highly incremental.
It is the embodiment of steady wins. Because if you remove just one source of chaos a week in a year, you have permanently removed 52 fires from your life.
Imagine running your business with 52 fewer emergencies every single year.
That is a completely different organization. That is what we mean by 365 freedom.
We have to reiterate the closing argument from the sources here because it's so powerful. Busy is not a badge of honor.
Stop wearing your exhaustion like it's a gold medal. It isn't impressive to anyone who actually knows how business works. It's just inefficient.
It is a flashing neon sign that you haven't done the hard work of the architect.
The ultimate choice comes down to this simple question. Are you running your business or is it running you?
Don't wait for the weekend to find peace. Don't tell yourself, I'll finally relax when I exit and sell the company.
That is a dangerous lie. You will burn out long before you ever reach an exit. You have to build the peace into the systems today. That is the mechanics of calm operations.
If you're ready to build a business with quiet precision, visit 365 Freedom Online. This has been another 365 Freedom Strategy session.
Before we truly wrap this up, I want to circle back to one thing you mentioned earlier, the void. The silence that comes after the chaos is gone.
Yeah, I feel like that is a hidden danger zone for a lot of people that we shouldn't gloss over.
It is. And the source material touches on this concept of the static of chaos. When that static finally clears from your life, you are left alone with yourself.
And you are left with the really hard questions you've been avoiding.
Questions like, is my core product actually any good? Or is my 5-year strategy actually sound?
The noise of the daily operations distracts you from having to answer those questions.
Exactly. Chaos is a fantastic hiding place for an insecure founder.
Because if I'm busy putting out operational fires all day, I don't have to face the terrifying fact that my product market fit might be weak.
I can just blame the fires. I can say, oh, I would absolutely fix the core product, but I'm just so swamped keeping the lights on.
It becomes a psychological crutch.
It is. So when you implement calm operations, you strip away all of your own excuses.
You are completely exposed.
You are. If the operations are running perfectly smoothly, the team is empowered, the protocols are working, and you still aren't growing, then you have a fundamental strategy problem.
And that is a scary realization for a founder to face.
But it is a necessary one.
It's the only one that actually matters in the end.
Because you can fix a strategy problem. You can pivot, you can rebrand, you can adjust pricing, but you cannot fix a ghost problem hidden behind a massive wall of noise.
I keep thinking about the student case study Mark one last time. The note mentions he was successful by external metrics, but a complete wreck internally. There's a term for this, the golden handcuffs of chaos.
Yes, because the money is still coming in, you justify the physical and mental pain.
You tell yourself, well, the bank account is growing every month, so this pain must just be necessary.
It artificially validates the dysfunction.
It really reinforces the behavior.
It's basic operant conditioning. I stress out, I run around, I panic, and then I get money. Therefore, stress equals money.
The entire intervention of this session is to break that false neural pathway.
Stress does not equal money. Delivering value equals money.
Stress is just the unnecessary friction cost of delivering that value poorly.
And if you reduce the friction, you actually get to keep more of the value.
You keep the money and you get to keep your sanity.
That is the ultimate goal.
I love the distinction the microstory makes in Source 2. It says, he stopped chasing his tail and started leading his team. The core difference between chasing and leading.
When you are chasing, you are always reacting to the past.
Something broke 5 minutes ago, and now you are sprinting just to catch up to baseline.
But when you are leading, you are creating the future. You are setting the direction for everyone else, and you simply cannot lead from behind the curve.
It reverses the polarity of your whole life. Instead of the business constantly pushing you around, you actively guide the business.
Guide is the right word. Pushing implies resistance and struggle. Guiding implies flow.
Calm operations is entirely about achieving that state of flow.
And looking back at Source 6, there's this social commentary on the badge of honor. Why do we do this to ourselves socially? Why do founders sit around bragging about getting 4 hours of sleep?
It's deep insecurity.
We don't know how to accurately measure complex strategic output, so we default to measuring brute input.
I worked an 80-hour week is a very easy metric to brag about.
I made 3 critical strategic decisions that will net us $500,000 next year is a much harder metric for people to see in the moment. So we default to the visible metric, which is sweat.
We really need to change the scorecard entirely.
The new scorecard should be, how calm were you today?
I love that. If you generated $10,000 today and didn't have to check your email once to do it, you won the game.
That is the new high score.
That is the true 365 freedom standard.
It is the only standard that is actually sustainable over a lifetime.
Well, we have thoroughly covered the diagnosis of the chaos tax, the trap of the hero complex, the mechanical solution of the audit, and the final result of quiet precision.
The rest is entirely up to the listener to execute.
The blueprint is right there. Grab the red pen, print your calendar, do the audit. Kill the hero, save the architect.
Kill the hero, save the architect. I think that is definitely going to be the quote of the session.
Put it on a Post-it note, stick it right to your monitor.
Seriously, do it today.
If you're ready to build a business with quiet precision, visit 365 Freedom Online. This has been another 365 Freedom Strategy session.